3 months later, when the county magistrate asked Eleanor Rook how a condemned Ropewalk had brought half the town to his courtroom, she placed a short length of hemp on the evidence table and tied a knot she deliberately left unfinished. The answer had begun on the day Ambrose Vale dismissed her after 12 years, withheld every shilling he owed, and paid her with the deed to Blackthorn Ropewalk. Everyone believed the building was empty. Eleanor believed it too until the skill her mother had taught her revealed identical unfinished knots beneath its beams. They were not random carvings, and one had recently been cut away. Now Vale wanted the Ropewalk demolished, his solicitor wanted the deed returned, and Eleanor had only days to understand a message hidden in the language of her own hands. On the day of her dismissal, none of that was visible. Ambrose gave her the deed in his mill office at Keldwick, County Durham, on a raw February morning in 1875. The walls trembled with the looms below. Eleanor stood before his desk, wearing the brown work dress she had mended so often that the original seams no longer existed. "Blackthorn is worth more than your disputed balance," he said. Her balance was not disputed by the figures. For 12 years, Vale had paid Eleanor 6 shillings each week and entered the rest into a deferred account, supposedly to clear the debts left by her mother's illness. 3 weeks earlier, the assistant bookkeeper had shown her that the debt ended in 1869. The unpaid remainder had reached £68 11 shillings. The assistant bookkeeper was dismissed before Eleanor could obtain a copy. "A condemned building is worth the cost of taking it down," she said. "Then sell the timber." The deed transferred Blackthorn's long gallery, stone-end houses, yard, and all appurtenant rights of support and access beneath the property. A folded notice attached to it demanded £7 12 shillings and sixpence in rates within 21 days. Another ordered the unsafe eastern end removed before March. Eleanor read the sentence about support twice. Vale watched her eyes and reached for the deed as though he had reconsidered. She signed the transfer before he could take it back. "You have accepted full settlement," he said. "I have accepted the property you valued as full settlement." Those are not the same words. His smile thinned. He gave her no keys. Blackthorn Ropewalk lay beyond the Miners' Row, between the old wagon road and a low ridge above Keldbeck. The building was nearly 400 feet long and scarcely 30 wide, built to let rope makers walk backward while twisting fibers into line. Slate had slipped from the roof in 3 places. The northern wall bowed around alder roots, and soot darkened the stone even though its tar boilers had been cold for 26 years. A squat marking house stood at the uphill end, locked with an iron bar. Eleanor entered through a door whose lower hinge had rusted away. Her boots raised gray dust from the gallery floor. At first, she thought it was old hemp waste. When she rubbed it between her fingers, black grains remained in the creases. Coal dust. No coal had been stored at Blackthorn. The first unfinished knot was carved beneath the road end beam. It showed one open loop, a crossing that had not been drawn tight, and 2 separated tails. The next beam carried the same shape. So did the third, the fourth, and every beam visible in the winter light. Eleanor's mother, Esther Rook, had taught her to copy weaving drafts with cord before Eleanor could write a full page. An overpassing tail meant a thread lifted. An underpassing tail meant it remained below. Nicks cut beside a loop gave the count. The unfinished knot mattered because its loose ends preserved direction. Pull it tight, and left became indistinguishable from right. From the gallery floor, Blackthorn's marks looked identical. Touched in order, they changed. One tail passed over, then under. The nicks advanced from 1 to 4 and began again. Some loops faced uphill, others toward the beck. At beam 17, the carving had been chopped away. Pale oak showed beneath splinters no more than a day old. Coal dust filled the fresh cut. Eleanor followed the remaining marks to the locked marking house. The final knot was carved upside down beneath its threshold. Beside it, a shallow crack crossed the floor and vanished under the iron-barred door. She laid her ear to the boards. Far below, Metal struck stone 3 times. The sound came again after a pause, followed by the faint roll of a wagon. Blackthorn was empty above ground. Beneath it, someone was working. Eleanor spent her first night in the least damaged bay, wrapped in her coat beside a lamp that consumed more oil than she could afford. She owned 1 shilling 9 pence, her mother's knotting pick, a bone shuttle, and a small tin holding 6 chord exercises Esther had made in childhood. The chord patterns had always seemed like lessons in patience. Now Eleanor saw the same unfinished form at the end of each. At midnight, the floor trembled. Dust dropped from the rafters. A loose pan of rainwater rippled, though the wind had stopped. The next morning, Vale's solicitor arrived with a constable. Mr. Clement Barlow said a clerical error had included underground support rights in the transfer. The mill intended to issue a corrected deed. Eleanor was to return the original and receive another conveying only the surface building. Mr. Vale wrote the valuation, instructed the clerk, and watched me read it. Eleanor said. Which part was the error? The mineral language is standard wording and does not reflect the bargain. Then it should not matter whether I keep it. Barlow offered 5 shillings for her inconvenience. When she refused, he warned that Vale would seek an order canceling the transfer. The constable did not take the deed. Eleanor kept it inside her dress after they left. Keldwick had grown around 2 kinds of work, weaving above ground and coal below it. Vale owned the largest mill and held the current lease to Crowbank Colliery, whose old workings ran somewhere beneath the eastern ridge. The mine had closed its nearest shaft years earlier, but the main pit still operated beyond the church road. No public plan showed galleries beneath Blackthorn. An old miner named Jacob Hales lived in the last cottage of Miners' Row. He had lost the strength in one lung after a roof fall and repaired baskets for a living. When Eleanor showed him a copied knot sequence, he recognized Esther's hand but not the message. Your mother marked winding ropes here before Vale closed the place, he said. Marion Blackthorn hired her because Esther could turn a survey into knots. A rope crew could feel in the dark. A survey of what? Crowbank. Mrs. Blackthorn's husband measured the old levels. After he died, she kept the plans because her ropes went down every shaft. Jacob remembered a collapse in 1848 that killed 6 men beneath a farm lane. The mine owner blamed an unknown bell pit. Marion Blackthorn and Esther spent a winter recording abandoned passages, support pillars, and drainage headings. Their plan contradicted the owner's account. Within 4 years, Vale's father acquired both the mine lease and Blackthorn's tax debt. The marking house was barred, the Ropewalk closed, and Esther took mill work. Why did she never tell me? Eleanor asked. Because your father still worked underground. Men who challenged a mineral owner did not always find another pit. The answer did not ease the hurt. Esther had died carrying knowledge Eleanor might have used. Yet, she had left the chord exercises, and she had taught her daughter how an unfinished knot retained direction. Jacob came to Blackthorn that afternoon. He tested the floor with an iron rod and found hollow echoes beneath bays, 14 through 19. At the erased 17th beam, the rod sank half an inch into a fresh seam between boards. Someone had lifted and replaced them. They removed 2 boards. A narrow shaft lined with brick descended into darkness. A new hemp ladder hung from an iron staple. Coal dust coated its rungs. Vale's men had entered the building from below and cut away the knot nearest their working. Eleanor did not descend. A blind shaft without tested air could kill before a person reached the bottom. Jacob lowered her lamp on a cord. The flame weakened at 20 feet, but did not go out. From below came the smell of damp stone, blasting powder, and recently cut coal. There's a heading under us, Jacob said. Not an old one. They replaced the boards and marked the shaft. Proof required more than a smell and a hole. Vale could claim miners entered to inspect the property he believed he owned. Survival again came first. Eleanor cleared 2 roofed bays and the small counting room. She sold rotten iron for 8p, patched the stovepipe with tin, and recovered enough hemp from sealed bins to make loom heddle cords. The first buyer was Martha Lowen, a 20-year-old school assistant whose father wove at home. Vale's shop charged him twice the old price for matched cords. Eleanor made 16, testing each under the same hanging weight. Martha paid 1 shilling 4p and brought 3 more orders. Jacob repaired a hand wheel from discarded gears. By the 4th day, Blackthorn could lay short plumb lines, window cords, and loom ties. It was not enough to meet the rates, but it turned the building from shelter into work. Martha also brought news. Vale's surveyors had marked a freight warehouse on the meadow between Miners Row and the school. Its foundation line crossed the low ridge above Blackthorn. The town believed the land solid because the nearest recorded mine level lay 200 yards east. Eleanor knew of at least one new heading beneath the Ropewalk. If the knots formed Marion's missing map, the erased beam might mark where Vale had crossed into ground his lease required him to support. She copied every carving before another could be destroyed. Overpassing tails became uphill turns, underpassing tails downhill. Side nicks gave 4 possible levels. The beam spacing supplied distance. When arranged like a 4-shaft weaving draft, the sequence produced branching lines rather than cloth. One branch ran from the old Crowbank shaft toward Blackthorn. Another continued beneath Miners Row. The cut mark at beam 17 lay where the 2 branches met. That evening, the school pump coughed black water into Martha's bucket. Coal dust in a village pump did not prove a mine beneath the school. Old spoil lay throughout Keldwick, and heavy rain could foul shallow wells. The weather had been dry, however, and the water smelled of iron from a deep seam rather than soot from a yard. Martha persuaded the school trustees to hire Arthur Denby, a solicitor who handled their lease. Denby was young enough to climb Blackthorn's broken steps and cautious enough not to call a knot map evidence before he understood it. He compared Eleanor's deed with the school boundary, the freight yard notice, and an old tithe map. "The surface is simple," he said. "You own Blackthorn. The mine lease owns coal beneath a much larger area. Between them lies a right called support. A mineral lessee may take coal only where the deeds permit the surface to settle or where adequate pillars remain. Your transfer specifically conveys Blackthorn's support rights, which is why Barlow wants it returned. Perhaps. We still need the mineral lease and reliable workings plans. The Crowbank lease was held by an estate office 30 miles away. The county mine inspector kept abandonment plans, but the nearest recorded closure predated current filing practices. Denby requested both and warned Eleanor that an old private map could reveal danger without establishing liability. Someone had to connect Marion's survey to an actual working. They began with the marking house. Vale claimed its key had been lost when the Ropewalk closed. A locksmith opened the iron bar under Denby's observation. The room beyond was dry because its roof had been boarded beneath the slate and its walls lined with tarred felt. Hundreds of brass pegs covered a low table measuring 12 feet by 8. Waxed hemp cords ran between them at different heights, crossing and branching like a loom draft laid flat. Each junction held an unfinished knot. The model had once been complete. A rectangular section near the center had been torn away. Fresh fibers feathered from the cut cords. Coal dust and boot prints led to a second-floor hatch, bolted from below. Along the wall hung wooden labels, stamped with level numbers and dates from 1846 to 1851. A drawer held 3 plumb bobs, a miner's compass, and small lead tablets punched with Esther Rook's initials. There was no signed survey, no lease, and no explanation written in ordinary words. Jacob stood before the cord model for a long time. "I worked 2 of these levels as a lad. This line is the old low Esther seam. That bend was called Widow's Elbow because the tubs jumped the rail." His memory provided names but not scale. Eleanor compared the model's knots with the beam carvings. On the table, distance was shown by cord length. Beneath the beams, it was compressed into nicks. Loop direction marked bearing. 1 to 4 nicks marked depth bands, and a double crossing identified coal left in place as support. An upside-down open knot marked a shaft, vent, or drainage rise connecting levels. Esther had turned 3 dimensions into a sequence that could be carried in a person's hands. Eleanor found one of her childhood cord exercises in the model's corner. Its 6 knots matched the route from the old shaft to Blackthorn. The exercise she had tied at 9 years old was not invented practice. Her mother had taught her a fragment of the mine. The missing rectangle corresponded to the branch beneath Miner's Row and the proposed warehouse. Denby sealed the room and made an inventory. He took the miner's compass, 2 lead tablets, and 1 dated cord section to his office. The rest stayed where its relationship to the table could be witnessed. For 2 days, Eleanor misread the model in a way that almost served Vale. The cord line beneath Blackthorn passed near a cluster of pegs stamped with crosses. Jacob remembered crosses being used for coal left standing, but Eleanor assumed they marked unworked reserves belonging to the surface owner. If the deed included valuable coal, Barlow's demand for its return made immediate sense. Denby corrected her after reading the mineral lease. Blackthorn owned no coal. The crosses represented pillars. The mineral tenant was forbidden to remove because they supported buildings and roads above. Their value did not come from extraction. Their value came from remaining untouched. Vale encouraged the mistake. His foreman told Keldwick that Eleanor invented a mine map to demand coal royalties. Men who might have supported a safety inquiry withdrew rather than become part of a mineral dispute. The vicar repeated that no hidden fortune lay beneath the Ropewalk. He is right about the fortune, Eleanor told Martha. He is wrong about why the map matters. The episode taught her to separate ownership from safety in every public statement. She claimed no seam, royalty, or right to mine. She claimed the support the deed named and the right to know whether it still existed. The cord model offered another warning. Several junctions used knots with one tail left much longer than the other. Esther's childhood exercises showed that the long tail marked the direction of air, not the direction of travel. On Marion's model, air once moved from the old shaft through a return below the school field. A fresh cord tied to the torn central section reversed that direction toward Crow Bank. Vale's new heading was not simply passing beneath the property. It was using an abandoned airway to ventilate work omitted from the current plan. Jacob held a smoking twist of paper near the brick shaft. The smoke drew downward, then west. The same underground pull could carry coal sediment into cracks feeding the school pump. Black water, fresh dust, and the changed cord all pointed to recent connection with an older level. None of those clues proved exactly where the roof was weak. They narrowed the area Eleanor had to reconstruct and explained why one section of Marion's model had been cut away rather than stolen whole. Vale's response came before sunset. Barlow filed for an order canceling the deed on the ground of clerical mistake and alleged that Eleanor had trespassed into workings excluded from the transfer. Ambrose offered £10 if she returned the deed voluntarily and withdrew every statement about the mine. He valued Blackthorn at £68 when it paid your wages, Denby said. He now says 10 should recover it. At least his arithmetic remains useful. The cancellation claim delayed demolition for 6 days because the court would not destroy disputed property. It did not delay the rates. Eleanor had earned £1 17 shillings. The gap remained enormous. Orders helped. Miners bought plumb lines and tool cords. Home weavers bought matched heddles. Martha organized evening work in the dry gallery, and Jacob taught 2 boys to dress hemp without cutting the long fibers. Eleanor paid each worker at the end of the day rather than promising future settlement. That slowed the rate fund, but she would not preserve Blackthorn by repeating Vale's debt system inside it. By the second week, a small community had begun to form around the ruin, not the whole town. Vale's shop refused Eleanor supplies. 3 mill overseers called her map a woman's fancy. The vicar warned the school trustees not to cause panic. Yet miners who remembered Widow's elbow came to touch the model and identify turns. Their recollections agreed more often than they differed. Work at Blackthorn followed a strict boundary between safe and unsafe bays. Jacob tapped the floor every morning before anyone entered. Martha painted white circles around boards that could bear a loaded wheel and black crosses where no one should step. Eleanor spent 8 shillings on second-hand roofing felt and hired a slater for one day to cover the counting room. The rest of the roof still leaked. Buckets moved whenever the wind changed. The repaired handwheel allowed only cords shorter than 30 feet. Longer work required the full gallery and would wait until joists were replaced. Eleanor rejected a profitable order for 200 feet of mine signal line because she could not maintain even twist across the broken bays. The buyer called her cautious. Jacob called her employed for another day. Their accounts remained visible on the counting room wall. In the first 10 days, sales totaled £2, 6 shillings, and 8 pence. Materials, food, fuel, and wages consumed £1, 14 shillings. Rates and structural work would require many times the remainder. Eleanor could have retained Martha's and the boys' pay, as Vale retained hers. Instead, she paid them and recorded the rate fund honestly at 12 shillings 8 pence. That choice became practical evidence of character when Vale accused her of manipulating the town for money. Customers could see that Blackthorn's income went into repairs and wages, not mineral speculation. A few miners began buying cords even when Vale's shop sold them cheaper. They were not giving charity. They were keeping an independent door open long enough for the inspector to reach it. One man, Owen Sayer, recognized the missing branch. He had driven tubs there during a brief reopening in 1863. Vale's father ordered the crew to take coal from support pillars beneath the ridge, then sealed the level after a roof weighting cracked the roadway. Were the pillars beneath the houses? Eleanor asked. Not then. Miners' Row had only 6 cottages. The school was still a field. Owen would not sign a statement. His 2 sons worked at Crowbank. I'll speak if the inspector asks underground, he said. Not before Vale can dismiss them. Eleanor accepted the limit. Fear did not make his memory false. The mine inspector's office replied that its plan showed Crowbank ending east of Blackthorn. The document had been deposited by Vale's father in 1855. Marion's cord map showed workings extending farther west before that date. Either her model was wrong or the deposited plan omitted them. The estate lease arrived next. It reserved continuous support pillars beneath the wagon road, Blackthorn, and any dwelling erected on the ridge. It also required new workings to remain 30 yards from abandoned levels whose condition was unknown. The fresh heading beneath Blackthorn violated both conditions if Eleanor's reconstruction was accurate. She needed to know where it went. Jacob tested air at the brick shaft and descended with a safety lamp and a line held by 3 people above. Eleanor followed only as far as the first landing. The new hemp ladder ended at an old stone drift, intersected by a recently cut heading. Fresh rails turned east toward Crowbank and west toward Miners' Row. Pick marks still held moisture. Candle grease marked a wall bracket. Eleanor tied a white cord at the junction and measured distance by knots as Jacob advanced. At 64 yards, fallen stone blocked the old drift. A narrow new passage turned around it. The roof there rested on timber sets instead of coal pillars. They found beam 17's missing carving in the spoil, a splintered piece of oak bearing half an open knot. Vale's men had cut it from above, carried it underground, and discarded it near the point on the map it represented. Beyond the turn, sound traveled through stone children reciting multiplication tables. The school stood overhead. Jacob ordered Eleanor back. The roof showed fresh cracks running across shale. A row of drilled holes waited for powder. One blast could bring down the old void beside them or open a cavity toward the school foundation. They returned to daylight with the oak fragment, measured cord, and coal samples from the new face. Denby sent an urgent notice to the county inspector and Vale. He demanded all blasting stop until an examination. Vale denied that any active heading lay beneath the school. He said the tunnel was a drainage inspection passage and accused Eleanor of entering the mine illegally. Crowbank continued its shifts. The following morning, 2 thin cracks appeared in the school's coal cellar. Dust fell whenever wagons moved beneath Blackthorn. Martha dismissed the children to the yard. The headmaster ordered them back after Vale's agent warned that an unnecessary closure would violate the school lease. Eleanor spread the copied knot map across a classroom desk. The erased junction fell beneath the coal cellar. The double-crossed marks indicating support stopped just east of the school. Beyond them, the map showed an open loop, a void whose full boundary had been torn from the cord model. She could not prove the exact roof would fall. She could prove no one knew what supported it. "Send the children home," Eleanor told the trustees. "On the word of a condemned property owner fighting a lawsuit?" the headmaster asked. "On the mine lease, the black pump water, the cracks under your feet, and a new heading, your landlord refuses to show an inspector." The trustees divided. Martha began putting coats on the youngest children without waiting. Eleanor rang the handbell and announced that Blackthorn would pay the missed afternoon wage of any parent required to collect a child. It was money she did not possess. 37 children left. 9 older pupils remained because their parents worked too far away. Eleanor moved them to the church hall across the wagon road. At 2:16, the school coal shed dropped 6 feet into the ground. The roof did not collapse. A cavity opened beneath one corner, taking the pump, 2 tons of coal, and half the cellar stair. Had lessons continued, the infant room wall would have settled with it. No child was injured. The sinkhole turned rumor into fear. Miners' Row emptied before dusk. Families carried bedding uphill and demanded the working plans Vale denied existed. Ambrose blamed an ancient bell pit and said Eleanor had used a predictable subsidence to inflame the town. He also stopped every Blackthorn order placed by a mill employee and evicted Martha's father from his tied cottage for spreading alarm. Eleanor opened the Ropewalk's counting room to the Lowen family. Her rate fund bought their first week of food and paid the school parents as promised. By helping people act on her warning, she spent the money that might have preserved her title. The county inspector arrived the next morning. He closed the western section of Crowbank pending examination and placed seals on Blackthorn's underground hatch. The magistrate ordered both sides to preserve all maps, cords, tools, and workings. That night, a charge exploded beneath the Ropewalk. The blast was smaller than a production shot but close enough to lift the gallery floor. Eleanor and the Lowens had moved to the church hall under the inspector's order, so the building stood empty. The road-end stone house cracked from window to foundation. 3 roof bays dropped. In the marking room, the peg table split, and the cord model fell into the shaft open beneath it. Vale's mine deputy claimed an old charge had fired accidentally. Powder did not wait 20 years beneath damp ground and then ignite after a preservation order. The new heading collapsed behind the seals, burying its rails, tool marks, and connection to Crowbank. Jacob's measured cord remained with Denby, but the underground passage Eleanor had seen could no longer be inspected. The school sinkhole might still be blamed on older workings. The original knot model, the clearest map, lay broken under tons of stone. The local board condemned Blackthorn entirely. Rates remained due in 5 days, and no work could continue inside. Barlow renewed the demand for the deed and added a claim for damage to Vale's mine caused by Eleanor's trespass. Standing beside the cracked roadhouse, Eleanor understood the purpose of the blast. Vale did not need to prove his version. He needed to destroy enough connections that every surviving clue could be called separate and uncertain. Esther's cord exercises felt slight in Eleanor's pocket. 6 knots. A child's lesson. The mind map had contained hundreds. Then Jacob asked why every exercise ended with the same unfinished knot. Eleanor untied the first cord and laid all 6 end to end. The final knot of one became the first direction of the next. Esther had not given her 6 fragments of the map. She had given her the key for joining any fragments that survived. Each exercise taught one operation. The first showed how an uphill-facing loop became north when the chord model turned. The second converted nicks into depth intervals of 10 fathoms. The third distinguished a driven passage from an older void. The fourth marked support pillars with a double crossing. The fifth showed how an upside-down knot connected levels. The sixth was a check. Follow 4 directions in order, and the chord returned to its starting peg. If it did not, the reader had joined a fragment incorrectly. Eleanor possessed copies of every beam mark except the one Vale's men had cut away. Denby held the dated chord section, miner's compass, and lead tablets. Jacob had measured the new heading before it collapsed. Martha knew the exact school pump and sinkhole positions. The estate lease named support boundaries. No single piece recreated Marion's model. Esther's joining key allowed them to test how the pieces fitted. They worked in the church hall because blackthorn was sealed. Eleanor stretched cords between nails driven into a wide board. Jacob named old bends and rises. Martha transferred surface buildings from the tithe map. Denby rejected any route based only on memory and marked it in gray rather than black. By the third night, a map emerged with areas of certainty, probability, and blank space clearly separated. The route Jacob and Eleanor measured underground closed correctly against the school sinkhole. The deposited Crowbank plan did not. It ended before reaching a return airway shown both in Marion's knot sequence and in Owen Sayer's account. The missing beam mark lay at the junction where the unauthorized new heading turned into that older airway. The blast had not destroyed the map's logic. It had confirmed which junction Vale most feared an inspector would find. Denby returned to the estate office with the 1,851 lease. A clause referred to the Blackthorn survey deposited herewith, though no survey had arrived in the first packet. The agent searched a box of mineral correspondence and found a tracing folded around the lease's waxed envelope. Time had blurred its ink, but the surviving lines matched Eleanor's chord reconstruction. Marion Blackthorn and Esther Rook had signed the margin. 2 mine viewers witnessed the depths. An attached memorandum explained the legacy. After the 1848 deaths, Marion and Esther discovered that Crowbank's former owner had removed coal closer to the road than his official plan admitted. They built a 3-dimensional chord model because flat plans failed to show where abandoned levels crossed at different depths. Rope crews carried route sequences as knotted lengths so they could report where a damaged winding line or fallen roof lay, even if smoke or darkness prevented reading. Marion lodged the tracing with the estate lessor and carved the compressed sequence into Blackthorn's beams. Esther retained the joining key. The mine owner promised to preserve specific coal pillars and keep future headings 30 yards away. When Nathaniel Vale later acquired the lease, he filed a simplified abandonment plan that omitted the western workings. The estate tracing remained because it was attached to the support covenant. But no later agent compared it with Vale's deposit. No one had found the truth earlier because the parts were held in different places by people seeking different things. The estate protected lease rights. The county inspector kept operational mine plans. Blackthorn's creditors saw only a derelict rope business. Esther's exercises looked like a child's lessons. Vale controlled access to the one building where the pieces visibly connected. By transferring the deed, Ambrose had given Esther's trained daughter both lawful access and the support rights named in the old covenant. The estate agent suspended Vale's mineral lease pending inspection. That decision froze the rate sale as well, because the value and safety of Blackthorn now depended on damage caused from below. A temporary stay was not forgiveness. Eleanor would still owe current rates if the title survived. It gave her time to prove what happened. The county inspector reopened Crowbank from the eastern side. Clearing the collapsed heading took 6 weeks. Every yard was shored and measured before men advanced. They found fresh rails continuing beyond the point shown on Vale's deposited plan, the drilled powder holes near the school, and the sealed junction beneath Blackthorn. The timbers carried Crowbank's current mark, not a mark from an abandoned owner. The powder book recorded one small charge issued on the night after the preservation order. Beside it, the clerk had written W.R. West Return. Ambrose claimed the letters meant wall repair. His own underground wage sheet paid 4 men a night, premium for bringing down West Return. One of those men, dismissed after Vale blamed the blast on him, testified that the order came through the mine manager with Ambrose's initials. Owen Sayer finally signed his statement after the inspector entered the mine, and his sons could no longer be dismissed for reporting a place Vale denied existed. He identified the older airway and the missing support pillars. His evidence did not stand alone. It matched the tracing, knot map, fresh workings, and lease. 3 months after the deed transfer, the county courtroom filled with miners, weavers, parents, merchants, and families from every house above the western levels. They had not come to see whether Eleanor kept a ruin. They had come to learn what remained beneath their floors. The magistrate looked at the cords, maps, mine plans, deeds, lead tablets, beam drawings, and account books covering 2 tables. "Miss Rook," he said, "how did a condemned Ropewalk bring half this town into my court?" Eleanor placed a short length of hemp on the evidence table and tied a knot she deliberately left unfinished. "Because this knot keeps its direction," she said. She showed the loose uphill tail, the underpassing turn, and 3 nicks beside the loop. Tightened, it would become an ordinary knot. Left open, it meant a passage bearing north, below the reference level by 30 fathoms. A double crossing would add a support pillar. Turned upside down, the same form marked a vertical connection. The magistrate asked how anyone could know that Esther's system had not been invented after the dispute began. Denby produced the estate tracing signed in 1851. The lead tablets from the marking house bore dates and level numbers that matched it. Jacob identified working names unknown to Eleanor before he saw the pattern. The county inspector showed where the reconstructed cord route predicted the new heading within 4 feet of its measured position. Martha placed the school sinkhole over the open-loop void on both maps. Barlow argued that Vale's men merely entered an old level for drainage. The inspector overlaid the current rails, powder holes, and coal face. An inspection passage did not remove saleable coal, require tub rails, or cut through reserved pillars. Crowbank's output book recorded extra coal during the weeks the West Return crew worked, but Vale's statutory plan remained unchanged. Ambrose still insisted the blast was an accident. The magistrate read the preservation order, powder entry, night wage sheet, and mine manager's instruction. The charge had been drawn, carried, and fired after the court required the heading preserved. Its position lay directly beneath Marion's marking house. "Why there?" the magistrate asked. Vale said he relied on his manager. "Yet you asked for the deed back before any manager knew Miss Rook had opened the floor." The room became quiet. Vale's final defense was clerical mistake. He said he never intended to convey support rights. Denby placed 3 documents before him. Vale had signed the deed containing those rights. He had signed a warehouse prospectus describing Blackthorn's support as secure. He had signed Barlow's first offer to purchase the rights back for 5 shillings. A man could not mistakenly convey a right, privately value it, and then seek to repurchase it without knowing it existed. Ambrose's confidence in paperwork had undone him. He kept separate explanations for workers, lenders, the estate, and the court. Once placed on the same table, they could not all be true. The magistrate upheld Eleanor's deed and rejected Vale's claim for its return. The estate terminated his right to work the western part of the mineral lease and placed Crowbank under independent management while safety repairs proceeded. The court held Vale and his mine company liable for Blackthorn's blast damage, the school subsidence, temporary housing, and the cost of securing the unauthorized heading. Evidence about violating the preservation order went to a separate criminal inquiry. The mine manager lost his certificate to supervise Crow Bank after admitting that he signed a false inspection entry. The 4 night shift men who fired the charge were not treated as equal authors of the scheme. Their wage sheets and testimony showed they had been told they were collapsing an unstable return under lawful instruction. 2 kept their jobs under the independent manager. The other 2 chose work at a neighboring pit. Ambrose's order mattered because he knew both the preservation notice and the map room's position. The separate inquiry ended in a fine and a term of imprisonment for contempt of the order, shorter than many in Keldwick wanted and longer than his partners expected. Eleanor did not measure justice by the number of days he spent confined. The lasting protection lay in the inspection system he no longer controlled. Eleanor's wages required an accounting. Vale argued that Blackthorn had settled the £68 balance. The court-appointed valuer found that, on the day of transfer, the condemned building and land were worth £6 after rates and known repairs less once the hidden mine damage was considered. Because Eleanor chose to keep the property, that £6 counted toward settlement. Vale was ordered to pay the remaining £62 11 shillings, along with her costs. He did not become poor. He lost something more precise: the mineral lease, control of Crow Bank, his warehouse project, and the power to decide which map everyone else was allowed to see. Mill partners removed him from daily management when lenders refused further credit under his name. Justice did not make Keldwick safe by the next morning. Every household above the western workings received a simple notice showing 3 categories: inspected and supported, inspected and requiring work, or not yet inspected. Blank knowledge was no longer colored green merely to calm buyers. 12 families remained in temporary rooms through summer. Vale's company paid the rent, but women still lost gardens, school routes, and the privacy of their own kitchens. Eleanor included those disruptions in the public record because structural repair did not erase them. Engineers began by sinking small boreholes from the surface at points taken from the reconstructed cord map. Where a bore entered open ground, miners packed stone through the nearest safe level. Where the roof had already fallen and compacted, they monitored settlement before adding weight. At Blackthorn, the sealed brick shaft became a permanent inspection access rather than being filled. Its ladder was replaced with iron steps, and air was tested before every descent. The cord map saved time but was never treated as perfect. One passage lay 8 yards south of Marion's line because a later crew had driven around bad stone. Another ended sooner than Jacob remembered. Each correction was entered in a different color and dated. Eleanor insisted on recording where her reconstruction was wrong. A legacy protected by pretending its maker never erred would become another authority people feared to question. The inspector divided the western workings into zones. Beneath the school, miners packed the accessible void with stone and furnace ash, building masonry stoppings where old roofs could not be trusted. Under Miners' Row, they left coal untouched and added timber sets in the passages that remained open. Trial holes were bored before any damaged foundation was rebuilt. The work lasted through 2 winters. The school used the church hall for 6 months. Its coal shed was never rebuilt in the old place. The infant room received a lighter timber floor over new masonry, and a brass plate at the door recorded the void below. Parents could read the inspection date rather than rely on a landlord's assurance. Blackthorn recovered just as slowly. Eleanor spent part of the wage judgment on living costs and placed the rest in a repair account. Mine company damages arrived by installment. Builders stabilized the roadhouse first, then reconstructed 4 gallery bays above sound ground. The section over the sealed shaft remained open as an inspection court with a removable floor grill. The Ropewalk resumed work in stages. Plumb lines and survey cords paid better than common string because each carried measured knots at specified intervals. Blackthorn also made loom heddles, mason's lines, and signal cords for mines operated under independent inspection. Eleanor refused orders for winding rope until she could afford full-length testing equipment. Competence included knowing which work a repaired building was not yet ready to perform. Martha became the keeper of surface records. She learned to transfer building lines onto the chord model and taught older schoolchildren how contour, depth, and direction differed. Jacob served as underground advisor on days his breathing allowed. Owen Sayer trained apprentices to recognize roof pressure. Without pretending experience, replaced a current survey. The new model occupied the restored marking house. It did not copy Marion's chords, as if the intervening years had never happened. Old workings appeared in black hemp, inspected passages in white, sealed voids in gray, and uncertain areas as empty pegs. Every change carried a date, name, and source. A paper tracing went to the estate. Another went to the county inspector. A simplified plan hung in the school hall. Not everyone welcomed public knowledge. House owners feared maps of voids would lower property values. One merchant called Blackthorn an advertisement for danger. Eleanor answered that unmarked danger had already lowered a school floor. Values might recover after support work. A buried fact did not become harmless because it preserved a price. By autumn 1877, Blackthorn employed 12 people and trained 8 apprentices part-time. The Riverside Gallery still showed patched stone and mismatched slate. Repairs followed income rather than appearance. Rates were paid from cordage sales, survey fees, and a modest annual payment for maintaining the public workings model. The annual payment covered records, not prosperity. Blackthorn earned most of its living from ordinary objects. Plumb lines for masons, measured cords for surveyors, heddles for weavers, and haulage signals for inspected mines. Eleanor set aside 1 shilling from every pound of profit for roof and wall work. Another 6pence supported the mapping room, where paper, pegs, and trained time cost more than visitors imagined. The remaining money paid wages and materials before it paid her. Martha objected when Eleanor took less than the senior cord makers. "You own the building and carry the legal duty," she said. "That is work too." Eleanor knew the old impulse behind her smaller wage, the belief that asking full value made a woman resemble Ambrose. She corrected it. From the next quarter, her management and inspection hours appeared as separate lines in the open account. She was paid at the rate agreed by Blackthorn's 5 adult workers, neither hidden above them nor sacrificed beneath them. The change mattered as much as the recovered £62. Vale had taught her that power meant deciding which labor counted. Blackthorn taught her that fairness required counting her own labor by the same visible rule. The public model attracted people with conflicting needs. A landlord wanted uncertainty removed from his street before a sale. A miner's widow wanted a suspected void, marked even if it frightened buyers. The independent inspector decided what evidence supported. Eleanor recorded who supplied it. When a claim remained disputed, the cord stopped at an empty peg. She refused to complete a route for the comfort of either side. One property owner sued after an empty peg appeared beneath his stable. Trial boring found no passage at the predicted depth. Critics called the map unreliable. Eleanor left the failed prediction on display with the correction. 6 months later, the same openness helped persuade residents to trust a new warning beneath the chapel, where boring did confirm an unrecorded shaft. Reliability grew from admitting both results. Copies of Esther's joining key went to the county office, the estate archive, and 2 neighboring mining schools. The original exercises remained at Blackthorn because their knots, wear, and fiber showed how the system had been used by hand. Eleanor encouraged other districts to adapt the method rather than copy its symbols blindly. A knot meant nothing without a known starting point, scale, and record of who tied it. Jacob lived long enough to teach the first full apprentice class. On his final day, he made them map the same short gallery independently and compare differences before seeing his own survey. He died the following winter. Not underground and not forgotten. His corrections remained in gray cord throughout the model, labeled with his name and the years he had actually worked each level. On the day the last family returned to Miners Row, Eleanor walked the reconstructed route with them above ground. Small iron studs marked safe observation points from the old shaft to the school. At each, a child tied the corresponding unfinished knot on a shared length of hemp. The cord was carried back to Blackthorn and added to the public model. Eleanor kept Esther's 6 exercises in a plain wooden case beside the first cord map. They were not displayed as relics from an infallible mother. Esther had hidden knowledge to protect her family, and the hiding had carried its own cost. The case explained both facts. At dusk, Eleanor stood beneath beam 17. The original carving was gone, but its cut edge remained visible beside a small plate showing the reconstructed mark. She did not carve a false antique into the new oak. The absence itself recorded what Vale had tried to remove. Above her, workers called lengths down the gallery. Below, no wagon moved through an unrecorded heading. The floor remained still. Eleanor took a short piece of hemp and began the knot she had tied in court. She left the final turn open, its 2 tails pointing clearly toward where the passage had gone and where the warning now remained. In Esther's language, an unfinished knot was not work abandoned. It was a direction preserved for the next pair of hands.